This Honourable Senate for Friday, July 16th, 2021 is called to order. We have two requests from members to join virtually, both of whom are traveling outside of the corporate area jurisdiction, and I'm satisfied that the travel is such that it was necessary, and I'm consequently asking the Senate to approve virtual attendance of Senator Longmore and Senator Golden Campbell, who will join subject to some technical difficulties that I think they are both on now. So I request the approval of the Senate for both Longmore and Golden Campbell to join virtually. Do I have your approval? Yes. Thank you very much. I have a note of absence from Senator Bunting, with the consequence that Senator Morris has the permission of the chair to sit in a seat other than his own and to address me as the leader of opposition business pro tem. We note also the absence of Senator Donna Scott Motley, who is out of the jurisdiction attending the funeral of celebration of life of her nephew in Barbados. So our thoughts and prayers are with her and her family. Statements by ministers. Announcements.
Laid on the table of the Senate today is a copy of the Bauxite Production Levy Act, Capital Development Fund, withdrawal number 1, order 2021.
Bills brought from the Honourable House of Representatives.
The following is a message from the Speaker of the House of Representatives. To the Honourable Senate, I have the honour to advise the Honourable Senate that on the 13th day of July 2021, a bill entitled An Act to Make Provision for the Prevention of Sexual Harassment and for Connected Matters was passed in the House of Representatives. Signed, Marissa Dalrymple Philibert MP, Speaker of the House of Representatives.
Mr. President, I signify my willingness to take charge of the bill.
A bill shortly entitled the Sexual Harassment, Protection and Prevention Act 2021 read a first time.
Mr. President, I beg to give notice of second reading of the bill.
Thank you, Minister. Madam Clerk, that bill is, can I get a copy of it? You have copies yet? Oh, thank you very much. Petitions, papers, reports from committees, notices of motions given orally, questions and answers to questions, motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice, motions relating to the sitting of the Senate, motions for leave to introduce bills, the presentation of bills without the leave of the Senate first obtained. Public Business Minister.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, today the State of the Nation debate continues with presentations by Senator Gabriela Morris and Senator Aubyn Hill in the order in which I have just named them. I ask, Mr. President, that you allow the debate to continue.
Thank you very much, members. Members, I ask you to recognize Senator Morris on her first maiden presentation at the State of the Nation debate, I believe. As they say in some other space, make her feel welcome.
Mr. President, it is with great pride and humility that I rise this morning to deliver my first State of the Nation debate. Colleagues, I must take a moment before proceeding to publicly acknowledge the Creator for extending a guiding hand, especially in these past few months, which have been both challenging and rewarding. I continue to be comforted by Jeremiah 29, verse 11. For I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper and not to harm. With this in mind, Mr. President, I continue to trust God's leading and guidance as I serve in the interest of the Jamaican people. Let me start by expressing gratitude to former Leader of the Opposition, Dr. Peter Phillips, for taking a chance on me, a humble young woman from the West. Thank you for entrusting me with this sacred duty of serving in this noble house, and for also seeing potential in me that I may not have yet seen in myself. To Leader of the Opposition, Mr. Mark Golding, thank you for granting me the opportunity to serve as spokesperson on youth and sport, and for always lending your wisdom and guidance. To you all, my colleagues here in the Senate, I want to register my gratitude for your warm welcome and show of support. To my colleagues on this side, thank you for taking me under your wing as the baby of the bunch and providing unwavering support and guidance. I'm truly grateful. To the staff here at the Parliament, thank you for your support. You have all been so welcoming and accommodating and professional. To my family and friends, you are my rock, my biggest cheerleaders. Thank you for always having confidence in me. And I must acknowledge my parents. I'll try not to cry at this moment. But I thank them for their sacrifices and their unending love, and most importantly, for teaching me a lesson that has guided my identity as a leader. Love people and treat them well. Colleagues, I also want to acknowledge my team and all the young people who have offered their time and their talent and their support. And lest I forget, all the scores of people, young and old, who right across the country and in the international community have shared kind words, encouragement, and advice. I value and I'm even more empowered by your support to continue to play my part in securing a brighter future for all Jamaicans. Mr. President, as I rise to contribute to the State of the Nation debate today, I cannot help but paint a realistic picture of what the real state of the nation is. I rise at a time, colleagues, when the state of the nation for the ordinary Jamaican is quite troubling. From rising gas prices, food cost, educational uncertainty, a health crisis, and an economic downturn, the country faces so many threats to its ability to continue. At the core of these prevailing issues, though, is the crushing impact on our youth, and that cannot be understated. And so while strides have been made, we cannot rest on our laurels here today, for there's still so much to accomplish if we truly want to make Jamaica the place to live, work, raise families, and do business. Mr. President, without equivocation or fear of any contradiction, I'm sure we can agree here in this place today that the pandemic has had a devastating effect on the economic as well as the social life of many Jamaicans. I've witnessed, and I'm sure you have too, many lives destroyed and set back by the direct as well as the indirect consequences of this pandemic. However, Mr. President, I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that like a phoenix rising from the ashes, we will move forward. I've also observed in these past few months the resilience of the Jamaican people, and in particular, our young people who have harnessed the opportunities in this crisis. They have started new businesses. They've learned and honed new skills. They have diversified their streams of income. Therefore, it is important that as we have discussions surrounding our recovery from the impact of COVID-19, that the conversation is not merely limited to returning to life pre-pandemic, but it's extended to exploit the opportunities that the pandemic has created. We must also learn from the lessons taught. And above all, I believe that we must revolutionize our thinking to not merely recover, but to thrive. Mr. President, you know, the harsh reality is that the impact of COVID-19 on the labor market has disproportionately affected young persons, especially under the age of 34. And I want to share with you some statistics. According to Statin's July 2021 Jamaica labor market impact of COVID-19 survey, approximately 21.06 or 35,900 individuals between the ages of 14 and 24 lost their employment during the height of this pandemic. This was even more acute when we look at the 25 to 34-year-old age category, which lost 42,300 jobs. The report highlights really that this age group has suffered the greatest decline in employment across the labor force. Cumulatively, persons under the age of 35 in this country have lost 78,200 jobs. Even more jarring, Mr. President, according to Statin labor force indicators, the youth unemployment rate has risen to 24%, an increase of over 5% from last year. And the reason for the job loss is clear, the pandemic. But Mr. President, you know, we cannot bury our heads in the sand and only blame the pandemic. If anything, I would say that the pandemic has revealed a fault line in our labor market, as the vast majority of our youth work in sectors vulnerable to economic shocks, such as tourism, the BPO industry, and the informal economy. And this makes their job security almost non-existent. The way that we improve this reality for many of our youth is not merely to reconstruct a pre-2020 economy with its many economic disadvantages for youth, but to create a truly 21st century economy that is focused more on technology, skills training, and vocational courses. We can look at the work of the Hard Trust, which I must at this moment laud for their tremendous contribution to young people. And just yesterday, we celebrated World Skills Day. However, I believe that much more needs to be done if we're to ensure that our population becomes more highly skilled to properly participate in tomorrow's economy. And let me say that the opposition supports the plan to reconstruct more STEM schools. Nevertheless, time is of the essence, and we must act now and in the short term so that our youth will not be left behind. In light of this, I want to recommend the following. A recommendation that the Ministry of Education accelerates the Coding in Schools program to deliver basic IT and coding in all secondary institutions. Secondly, we must look at increasing subsidies and resources to schools that will allow them to fund the offering of new CAPE subjects such as digital media and green engineering. Both subjects are important in the short term to prepare our young people to become creators and not merely consumers of technology. Third, I want to propose that we continue the work done by the last PNP administration by building on the framework of the creation of the Jamaica Logistics Hub Initiative. We must continue our efforts to create thousands of stable, highly paying, and highly skilled jobs. Since the government has taken office, we have seen a lag in its implementation, thus endangering our ability to capitalize on our strategic location, our youthful population, and the expertise of many of our students leaving CMU and other universities with degrees in logistics and supply chain management. Mr. President, the PM here often refers to Singapore's development as the model for Jamaican development. And if we are indeed serious about this, becoming like Singapore, then we have to stop dragging our feet on this important issue of equipping our young people with skills, especially vocational skills. Fourthly, I want to make the call for the Ministries of Investment, Industry, and Commerce, as well as Economic Growth and Job Creation, in partnership with the private sector, to diversify the proposed ventures of the special economic zones. We need to increase disclosure on how to become members, and not solely focus on overseas investors and established players, but also establish a pathway for our young people to flourish and be a catalyst for technological advancement, skills training, and entrepreneurial development. Mr. President, frankly, we have to invest more resources to attract as well as retain our brightest young people and attract international investors. The recent announcement of the $1.3 billion investment should not blind us to the reality, as it doesn't target many local investors, but instead, it should guide us on a path to recovering stronger. I will not dispute the positive impact of employment that has been created, but any strong economy is built on the strength of our small and medium businesses. And I believe that we have in some parts forgotten the importance of a rising tide lifting all boats, but have embraced big business and a trickle-down economics, which prevents sustainable growth and development. Therefore, I'm calling on the government to marshal the considerable resources of the Development Bank, the Exim Bank, JAMPRO, and the Special Economic Zone Authority to designate such spaces that will allow our young people to participate. Mr. President, I have to touch on the creative industries a bit. The creative sector has suffered tremendously, both from systematic neglect and also the onset of this pandemic. And successive governments have paid lip service to the need for sustained investment in this orange economy. So much so that it seems as if the only time the creative industries is mentioned is when we're bragging about Jamaica's creativity, or we're talking about someone who has succeeded despite, but not as a direct result of any governmental assistance. The pandemic, I believe, has called into sharp focus the relief role that needs to be played by the government in assisting our creatives. When we look at the role of the JCDC, it causes us to question whether their role must be expanded to include an incubator for Jamaican talent. Beyond that, I believe that if the sector is to truly rebound, the ministries of culture and entertainment, as well as tourism, must play a more pivotal role in marketing Jamaica as a cultural mecca and marketing the talent that exists here, thus spurring economic growth, but more importantly, doing social good in the country. Therefore, I believe that while the $50 million that is pledged by the ministry is a start, much more needs to be done both administratively and financially, not just to cauterize the pandemic-related hemorrhaging, but to place it on the path to sustainable growth. It would be remiss of me if I didn't speak a little bit about sports. Now more than ever, I believe that it is crucial to delve into making plans for the future of sports in Jamaica. We saw how devastating it was when COVID-19 first hit us in March 2020. And now, luckily, we have a little more experience and wherewithal to roll out mechanisms to help the sector recover. To ameliorate the struggles that we're facing and to help the sporting industry move forward, we have to take into consideration the feedback of all stakeholders. And while we're happy to have seen Sigma Run and Champs and the Olympic trials proceed despite the pandemic, there is a great need for the organizational structure and management to be employed so that other events and other disciplines can participate in this way. I believe that if the government understands the tremendous social as well as economic power of sports, then we will continue with this momentum as we aim to bolster all areas of the sporting sector. As a nation that has erected a lofty reputation in international sporting circles, we must optimize and leverage our sporting talent and our facilities for the sake of economic growth and development. It is often said that we have to treat sports like a business. And I agree. Jamaica's survival and development will depend on the growth of this industry and our investment in our athletes. Jamaica's rich sporting programs and resources, as well as our geographic positioning, make us well-suited to host international athletes who could train with our local athletes and coaches. And we must continue to facilitate and encourage these partnerships as they will help in driving not just the sporting economy, but will fuel growth in other sectors such as tourism. In my consultations with athletes, coaches, and industry leaders in sports, I've learned that many of their concerns extend beyond athletes' ability to remain competitive. It goes beyond that. It's about the economic fallout within the sector, the setbacks in regional and international competitions, the loss of scholarships and recruitment opportunities, as well as the mental health of many of our athletes. These concerns are truly valid as lives and livelihoods are on the line. With this in mind, I want to again make the call for the revival of the National Council on Sports, which I believe can facilitate dialogue on important issues in the sporting world, and also bring together the sporting associations, technocrats, and other key stakeholders. The reconvening of this council will also allow for the sharing of best practices, facilitate collaboration, and should assist in establishing a plan of action which includes short-term and long-term growth goals for the sector. Sport is such an important part of our national identity. Thus, we have to support them beyond cheering when they excel. But we must work in the interest of all our sportsmen and sportswomen to ensure that there's a 21st century plan to advance Jamaica's standing in all disciplines. With that said, Mr. President, it would be truly remiss of me not to end this point by wishing all our Jamaican athletes who will go to this year's Olympics all the best. I want to also invite you to commend and wish our reggae boys well as they compete in the Gold Cup journey. When we consider the real state of the nation, education is an area that brings much cause for concern. We're living in the greatest education emergency of our lifetime. According to UNICEF Jamaica, since the onslaught of the coronavirus pandemic, school closures have affected 600,000 students. The entire education system was shaken and thrown into the land of the unknown. Notwithstanding such an unexpected shift, also highlighted the many ills of the education system. As such, I believe that it is now upon us to rectify those ills so that our education system may recover and adapt to 21st century standards. Undoubtedly, Mr. President, access has been one of the primary challenges of our students. COVID-19 has exacerbated the deficiencies in Jamaica's digital infrastructure. Access to the internet continues to present a barrier for students, especially those from rural Jamaica. And if we're serious, truly serious, about recovering stronger and building a 21st century education system, then we must prioritize improving connectivity. The internet is one of the most valuable tools for youth at this juncture in our history, and Jamaican youth must not be left behind. I'm therefore petitioning the government to pay closer attention to the inequities created by the digital divide and move swiftly to establish in the long term reliable networks across the island, but in the short term, seek to designate more access points and learning centers, especially in rural areas that will grant youth access. The shift to an online modality has also increased absenteeism, as many students simply don't have the necessary devices and continued internet service. Furthermore, many of our young people are left unsupervised at home to navigate distance learning on their own, with teachers, some of who themselves are lacking the proper training to successfully navigate this modality. Training and resources, I should say. In addition to these challenges, it is also quite worrying that the closure of schools has increased the cases of child abuse. As of May, the Child Care Protection and Family Services Agency reported that 12,600 cases of child abuse and rising numbers in missing cases have been reported. In the past few weeks, we've all noted with outrage the horrifying acts meted out against our children. And colleagues, I believe that the onus is indeed on us here in this House to join in ensuring that legislation protects our children. But in addition to that, I want to encourage Jamaicans to remember that it still takes a village. It requires the continued partnership of community members who will report instances of abuse. Our children are vulnerable, and we need to protect them. And of course, though the expected outcomes of learning loss will affect most, if not all, children, we can reliably predict that this will be disproportionately borne by children from low-income families. The school has often been a safe haven for many of our children. And let us not forget that school is not just about formal education, but it is also a critical site of children's social and emotional development. A UNICEF poll of adolescents and youth aged 13 to 29 in Latin America and the Caribbean, investigating the feelings adolescents faced in the first month of the pandemic until September 2020, found that 27% of them reported feeling anxiety and 15% of them reported depression. Imagine 1 year into a pandemic with little to no change as it relates to plans for the education system, continued uncertainty, and haphazard announcement of the phased reopening of schools. Our children are not coping well. And we must do all we can to support them during this pandemic. As it stands, the overall threat that school closures place on youth educational, social, and economic development, and the long-term implications that this might have on the future growth or lack thereof of our nation, is one that is crippling, and we have to address it. While there have been efforts to assist with the provision of tablets and the implementation of a phased reopening of schools, I believe that a more long-term plan needs to be created to properly safeguard the education of our children. We are about to approach a new school year, and as such, we must take the time to formulate a robust plan that will not only help us to recover and adapt to this new norm, but a plan that will strengthen the education system's resilience and responsiveness in preparation for future shocks. Let me say that we have to ensure that there's greater emphasis on the digitization of the education system. And now we're forced to appreciate the grave importance of technology. Our students and teachers alike ought to by now be in receipt of the necessary tools to facilitate online learning. Capri has reported that more than 20,000 teachers out of 31,656 have been trained to deliver online classes. However, what is a workman without his tools? Additionally, teachers are not the only ones in need of online training. Students and parents should receive some training that will facilitate them properly navigating the online space. Most importantly, I want to again emphasize that a framework must be created for the phased reopening of schools. This reopening should not be a haphazard announcement, but one that is built on the input of educators and stakeholders. When we look at the UNICEF framework, schools should operate in a blended approach, where for face-to-face classes, there should be a timetabling and scheduling that allows each year group to be duly accounted for. The aim should be for the reintegration of marginalized children, with emphasis on remedial learning to compensate for the loss. Proper evaluation will also be required to assess the learning gaps that exist, so that we'll be able to tailor our curriculum accordingly. Continued emphasis must also be placed on digital literacy so that our students will not be left behind. Notwithstanding, we cannot ignore the risk of COVID-19. Such as prior to reopening, schools have been running without water or proper sanitation stations and a cleaning routine to sanitize classes after being in use. we have to ensure that the proper protocols are in place in our schools to protect our children and also to protect the teachers and workers. A decision model must be developed for the reopening and closing of schools if necessary, if there should be a resurgence of community transmission on a wide scale. And this should not be a haphazard decision that is communicated from a podium at a press conference. Stakeholder communication is critical in building trust and engendering the partnership needed for a functional education system. Parents, teachers, and students should be better informed of the plan of action and the status of the education system. As was profoundly...
Mr. President, might the speaker be permitted a further 10 minutes to complete her presentation?
Thank you very much. The question is that the speaker be given an additional 10 minutes to complete her presentation. Those in favor? Against? Thank you very much, Senator. Continue, please.
Thank you. As was profoundly stated by the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, now is the time for us to take bold steps to create inclusive, resilient, and quality education systems fit for the future. I agree. A 21st century education system calls for us to ensure that no student is left behind. Not rural students, certainly not students with disabilities. There must be greater attention placed especially on these two groups of students and getting them back on track. In summation, Mr. President, Jamaica has been hit hard by the pandemic. Nonetheless, our people have proven themselves resilient. With little, but with talawa, as we have always said. And the government, therefore, should seek to assist, develop, and respond to the Jamaican citizenry and reward their resilience. Their needs are significant, and many of them have been left unaddressed. This is what has resulted in the current state of the nation. However, Mr. President, there remains in no small part the light of hope. We have hope. Hope that we can recover our sporting and education sectors. We can build the capacity of our youth. We can ensure that we secure a brighter future than the one currently available to us. Mr. President, the state of this nation is not hopeless. Today, I have explored a number of recommendations in the area of youth, education, and sports, and it is my hope that the other side has listened keenly. We cannot afford to not ramp up our efforts and adapt these areas in a manner that not only meets the new challenges, but remedies the old weaknesses. The COVID-19 pandemic has not beaten Jamaica, a country which has risen to face the 21st century challenges before and will continue to take advantage of 21st century opportunities. Our athletes, our youth, our students, they expect this, and we, their representatives, must deliver. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Morris. Senator Hill. Senator Samuda. Thank you, Senator Hill. I recognize you.
Mr. President, it's indeed a pleasure as I rise again in this noble Senate to present another State of the Nation address. This time I rise not only as a senator but also as a Minister of Cabinet, and for those two privileges, being a senator and a Minister of Government, I'm particularly grateful to the Most Honourable Prime Minister, Andrew Holness, for granting me these distinct privileges to serve Jamaica and him. You know, Mr. President, sitting in the Cabinet has enhanced my perspective and provided me with a closeness to discussions which allows me a much clearer insight as to what happens at the highest policy-making level in the country. It also gives me a clear view of how some of our leading personalities operate. And here I want to comment on a statement that the Prime Minister's detractors like to make, that he seeks to behave in a dictatorial manner. Mr. President, nothing could be farther from the truth. I sit in Cabinet and watch the Prime Minister allow every kind of opinion to be placed on the table. He avoids no one and therefore allows all opinions to be heard. Prime Minister Holness's patience is admirable and even inspiring, Mr. President, and his ability to accommodate sharply divergent views makes him an exemplary democratic leader. Mr. President, Cabinet meets from 10 a.m. till well past 10 p.m. sometimes, and that is because Prime Minister Holness allows everyone his and her say, and then he sets about crafting a set of consensuses which is then taken to the people via Parliament the very next day. There could be no greater democratic exercise than the one which Andrew Holness conducts at his weekly Cabinet meetings. Mr. President, I am indeed privileged to serve this very democratic Prime Minister as a member of his Cabinet. I must also thank my small number of staff members and advisors at the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation. A special and big thank you must go to our Permanent Secretary, Mrs. Audrey Sewell, who has been gracious and patient in helping me get established in the ministry, and she has guided me around the corridors of government using and sharing her wealth of experience. My advisors and consultants, Mrs. Sewell deserves that round of applause. She's outstanding. My advisors and consultants and my executive assistant, Ms. Cadian Jonas, have all been extremely capable and hardworking, and you will hear more about them later this year as we try to get legislation through Cabinet and Parliament. Mr. President, I want to say a heartfelt thank you to the very kind, hardworking, and hard-pressed staff of the Parliament for their courtesy, their grace, their guidance, Ms. Curtis, and before her, Mrs. Cook, and wisdom they have bestowed on me as I try to get my duties done. Thank you all so very much. And my colleague senators, thank you for accommodating and putting up with me, especially the senators on this side of the aisle. Thank you all so very much. Right before you, my dear, I say all of you. And Sophie, Mr. President. Of course, Mr. President, a very, very special thank you must go to my family members, especially my dear wife, Tamara. for being so patient and helpful as I try to carry out my added duties as a member of Cabinet. Many thanks to my close friends and collaborators in the 1-1 Cocoa Group, and they know who they are. And as you know by now, Mr. President, my deepest gratitude and thanks must go to my Holy Heavenly Father, who has blessed me with the grace and mercy of His Son, the Lord Jesus Christ, and offers me His guidance, wisdom, understanding, and courage, even when I do not deserve it or even desire it. And so, Mr. President, it is now time, Senator Bryan, to speak of resilience, strength, and growth in the global services sector, which we generally know as the BPO sector. I heard my dear friend, Senator Morris, on her maiden speech, speak a lot about this. I will give you some other perspectives. Almost everything changed for the worse during COVID-19 pandemic, which arrived in Jamaica in March 2020, Mr. President. Health, schooling, and education, and yes, we've had challenges, but boy, Minister Favour Williams is working hard with her team to make sure our schools get back on track this summer and into the fall. Schooling, education, entertainment, employment, real growth in unemployment, how people work, mainly a lot from home, travel and tourism, and how we socialize with our family members and friends all took a very negative downturn since March 2020. This is a very good time, Mr. President, to encourage Jamaicans to go and take your vaccine when your turn comes. If me could have lift up the shirt and jacket of my left hand, like many Jamaicans, not just at my vintage, but a little younger, will have vaccination marks on their left hands. We know vaccinations in Jamaica. We've done it. We've been leading. Let's not be laggard. When your turn comes, Jamaicans, go take the vaccine. Mr. President, I'm really pleased to report that there is one business sector in Jamaica that has stood out during this period for its resilience, strength, and growth. It is the BPO sector, which is part of the Global Services Association of Jamaica. There are others like construction and service delivery sectors that also showed, and of course food. Senator Webby, whole heap of food. Look at Grace's numbers, guys. Have you seen those numbers? Great, great, great. So some sectors have stood out, but this morning, Mr. President, this day, I am looking exceptionally at the business process industry that has performed so very well over a very difficult last year and a half. My colleague, again, Senator Don Webby, who opened this year's State of the Nation debate last month, spoke about the work JAMPRO is doing with the Global Services Association of Jamaica, especially training young people to meet the demand of members of the Global Services Association of this country. JAMPRO is working hard to make sure we train our young people to get those jobs that you will find have increased in this sector. As of June 30th, 2021, latest figures, Mr. President, the BPO sector employed 44,000 people compared to 38,400 for a similar period in 2020. That's approximately 15% increase in jobs year over year when the economy was shrinking by over 10% during the same period. Jamaicans We are building back stronger. Mr. President, I'm extremely pleased to tell Jamaicans that in the year to June 30, 2021, the BPO services sector brought in US $780 million to the Jamaican economy. That's no small sneeze when at a time when our economy was shrinking. So clap again for $780 million coming in through the BPO sector. We are, Mr. President, building back stronger. There are 87 operators in the sector, Mr. President, both domestic and international, occupying 105 sites across Jamaica. 10 of these operators are Fortune 500 companies. We want to say it loud and say it clear that this Andrew Holness administration truly appreciates the commitment of cash, management and energy these investors have made to Jamaica and the thousands of jobs they have provided for so many grateful Jamaica. We are thankful to them, Mr. President. The Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation, in which I serve, will continue to do everything in our power and within the law to provide the support and ease of operation these investors need to run their businesses. The markets which the companies in the Global Services Association of Jamaica serve include Canada, the wider Caribbean, China, the United States, Europe, and the Philippines. Growth plans for this sector include 9 new sites across Jamaica by existing players, Senator Morris, which means, of course, it's the younger Senator Morris to whom I speak, which means organic growth, Mr. President, and there is a new investor who is about to establish a center-seat facility in the Montego Bay area. Mr. President, we are building back stronger every day. So let's look at making work at home work better. The unannounced and sudden arrival of the deadly pandemic in the first quarter of 2020 forced immediate and radical changes on many of our activities, including the operations of the business processing industry in Jamaica. The relatively early spike in a BPO operation of the COVID-19 virus soon after the virus arrived in Jamaica spurred all the stakeholders, including the government, to adjust and change behavior. A major and swift response to the early spike was to agree to a set of protocols to allow Jamaicans to do their BPO work from home. Equally urgent and important was the need for the government to allow businesses to move their laptops and similar computing equipment to their employees' homes without paying duty and related fees, which were avoided when the government gave them permission to put these equipment in their normal and registered places of business. We had to change that arrangement. The work from home experiment started in early 2020, and as soon as I was appointed to the Cabinet and in the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation in September, I quickly got involved in getting an additional 6-month extension for the work at home policy in December 2020. Here I must compliment Minister of Finance, Dr. Nigel Clark, for working with the Global Services Association of Jamaica and myself to get these extensions in place, often just before the expiry date of the current approvals. I have been negotiating with the Minister of Finance since that time, and just before the end of June and the last 6-month extension, Dr. Clark and his team at the Ministry of Finance agreed to a longer 1-year extension at the work at home policy. That's a very important move. This longer extension allows investors and operators more planning and operating time, something for which the operators had been pressing. Compliments must also go to Ms. Gloria Henry, who runs the Global Services Association of Jamaica and has been a relentless prodder and pusher through her many personal interventions with me and others to get the longer period extended. Congrats, Ms. Henry. Mr. President, there is a relationship between the Global Services Association of Jamaica and the Jamaica Special Economic Zone Authority. It has to be addressed. The pandemic has caused us to make a close review of the activities in Jamaica's global services business, and especially in the BPO sector of that association. In the process, we have decided to look at how best to make work at home operate more smoothly, efficiently, and mutually beneficial to all stakeholders. In this review, we have noticed that the working arrangement between the Jamaica Special Economic Zone Authority and the Global Services Association of Jamaica's members and operators is less than efficient and needs a thorough reworking. Many operators in the global services sector find the JACIZA, Jamaica Special Economic Zone Authority, to be overly bureaucratic sometimes, often inefficient, and that it takes too long to get responses and decisions. For instance, operators say it takes up to 8 days to get approval to move equipment from sites to work-at-home facilities. That's just too long. JACIZA quarterly reports often ask for information that is not regularly tracked. The operators want us to look at giving them their own legislative arrangements, possibly separate and apart from being under the JACIZA. We're looking at this. No decision has been made yet. The new chairman of the JACIZA board, Mr. Chris Levy, fully understands this government's commitment to make the necessary changes, and he and his experienced board will have the authority and responsibility to do what is best for JACIZA, the entities and people it serves, and Jamaica. Clearly, Mr. President, as Prime Minister Holness has been saying, we want our colleagues in government to move swiftly up the service mindset and efficiency ladder, even as they keep to accounting accuracy, transparency, and integrity guidelines. We're not going to compromise on those, but we must be much more efficient. We must see the government as a service organization, not one that stops people and put red tapes in the place, but to help people to create jobs. That is a mantra that this government is carrying forward and must execute on to make sure we build back stronger. Absolutely. Mr. President, we're reviewing these requests and comments, and more will be said on this in the near future. We at the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation want to make it clear the importance we place on the growing sector, this growing sector of our economy. We want to take all the necessary steps to make sure the BPO and other sectors within the Global Services Association of Jamaica have every operational incentive and ease within our laws and regulations to grow and prosper for all of our mutual benefit. Mr. President, you know that I have to speak about water. Water is an integral factor in building back stronger. Mr. President, it's a firm truism that no one says anything about water until they do not have it. That's a good idea. Speaking of water. That is a nice way, Mr. President, for saying you will not get any compliments for running water in a person's pipe day after day, night after night, month after month, but God helps you, the provider, when water supply stops due to a broken or leaking pipe or a schedule cut off. No grace for you. While the constant public focus is always on potable water, drinking water supplies to our domestic and commercial entities, 70% of the water that is managed in Jamaica goes for irrigation. Minister Floyd Green is making sure we're going to get more out of that investment. I hear him and I know what he's doing, and we look forward to that. There is good news on the irrigation front, Mr. President. About 3 years ago, while I was the chairman of the National Irrigation Commission, I started a set of discussions with the then French ambassador, Mr. Jean-Michel Despac, who arranged for the French government's economic development arm to provide financial support to undertake a study of possible irrigating the South St. Elizabeth area using the surface water of the Black River system. The location is fortuitous in that it combines the waters of the Black River Basin, the largest river in Jamaica, with the very productive but often dry southern plains of St. Elizabeth, which is contiguous to the river basin. Minister Floyd Green has kindly agreed to have me continue collaborate with his ministry and the NIC on the project, especially as we move into the financing phase. When the project is completed, it will provide expanding irrigation services to at least 4,000 farmers on 4,100 hectares, that's 10,138 acres of land, serving several communities in the breadbasket parish of St. Elizabeth, including Newell, Flagaman, Potsdam, Top Hill, and the Southfield areas. Mr. President, at the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation, new sustainable jobs are important to us, as they are to each Jamaican. This investment will produce new and sustainable jobs. This will be building back stronger, Mr. President. Both the feasibility assessment and the preliminary engineering designs were completed in 2019 by the French firm using a FACEP grant valued at euros 692,500. That was the grant that we got from the French government to do this study, and we thank the French government for their assistance. The feasibility assessment indicates that the project enjoys 97% support from the local farmers. The conclusion from the feasibility assessment is that the Pedro Plains project is a worthwhile development objective that will bring significant benefits to both the local economy and the country, in keeping with the Vision 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. The investment cost for the project is estimated at $191 million, with an economic internal rate of return ranging between 20 to 22%, Senator Webby. The net present value was calculated at $750 million, cumulated over a 30-year period. The National Irrigation Commission is obliged to secure an environmental impact assessment report as a pre-project requirement of NEPA, and the NIC sought a $40,000 grant from the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service to fund the EIA study. This project, Mr. President, is essentially a climate change mitigation project that will use renewable solar energy to pump water from the plains of the Black River Basin, up the hill to Monroe College, that great institution situated on a hill that cannot be hid, Mr. President. Up to Monroe, Senator Morris. Up to Monroe College, and will gravity feed the water back down to the farming areas that were mentioned above. Given the impact on the environment and the prospective positive effect on climate change that this project will have, the French government has already indicated its willingness to provide longer-term and cost-efficient financing, along with participation by the government of Jamaica and local financial institutions. all committed and ready to go when we're ready. The Ministry of Finance and the Public Service sees this as a very worthwhile investment that will enhance significantly a major economic growth area among a set of Jamaicans that we know to be high-producing and productive farmers. The ministry has approved, that's the Ministry of Finance, has approved the expenditure of the $40,000 to do the environmental impact assessment study, Mr. President, and I'm pleased for that, and I thank the Ministry of Finance for that benefit. But there are some hard realities and opportunities that exist at the National Water Commission. Mr. President, in the last 15 years, the National Commission has made a net loss every single year. I have the spreadsheet here, all 15 years spread out. I have the profit and loss, and I have the balance sheet, all spread out. 15 years of loss. Now, some accountants may challenge me on the profit figure for 2013 because there was a 1.15 billion profit, accounting profit for the year. That was no cash that anyone could spend, Mr. President, just an accounting technicality resulting from the treatment of a timing difference related to deferred taxes. If you need further explanation, Senator Webby can have him and his team explain it to you, as I will if you want, if you're interested. The total accumulated loss for the 15 years since 2006, Mr. President, is, listen to this, $42,908,370,000 Jamaican dollars. Source a loss on this spreadsheet from the National Water Commission. In 2019, the NWC made a huge loss of $4,520,272,777, while in 2020, the NWC recorded a further whopping $5.67 billion loss. Loss after that $5.6 billion was about the same loss the sugar company made in the last year of its operation. Mr. President, what those losses mean is that in 2019, Jamaican taxpayers, many poor taxpayers, Mr. President, had to pump in over $4.5 billion into what is like a sinkhole for money at the NWC. And those same poor Jamaican taxpayers had to inject an even larger amount of $5.7 billion into the Commission in 2020. The independent auditor's report, listen to this carefully, for March 2021 disclosed that the NWC had an accumulated deficit, as I told you before, of $42.9 billion at the end of their 2020 financial year, and at the end of 2019, that figure was $34.6 billion. The accumulated deficit, clearly, Mr. President, keeps going up. The bottom line of all this perennial loss-making water and sewage delivery service carried on by the National Water Commission is that it has a huge negative net worth of $12.6 billion as of March 31st, 21. Its equity is completely wiped out, Mr. President. Mr. President, the hard truth is that the NWC makes only losses in the business. Losses that have to be financed by many poor Jamaicans every year. The hard truth is that NWC does not have anything near the amount of money it needs to deliver the water and services Jamaicans need and expect. And the government of Jamaica does not have the cash or the fiscal space to take on the debt to give NWC the money it needs to spend. The external auditors rendered the following opinion on the National Water Commission in its the most current annual report, or its most current assessment of the financial statements. These conditions indicate that the existence of a material uncertainty that may cast doubt about the Commission's ability to continue as a going concern. Senator Webby would tell you that when you hear that, you know your company is practically finished if you're in the private sector. Mr. President, I make the case, and many Jamaicans understand the dark and stark reality, that this perennial loss-making activity at the NWC is simply not sustainable. But water is life. So what do we do, Mr. President?
After the motion. No, Minister. Yes, Senator Morris.
Time having been expired, may we extend his speaking time for another 10 minutes to complete his presentation.
Members would have heard the question. Those in favor? Thank you, Senator Morris.
Although the NWC does not have the full and very substantial amount of cash it needs to operate efficiently and to meet the growing expectations of the citizens that it serves, we at the NWC still spend a lot of money to keep supplying water to Jamaicans and to keep thousands of Jamaicans in decent paying jobs. Here's a small sample of the $7.5 billion that we will spend in this fiscal year. The Greater Mandeville Water Supply Improvement Project will spend $500 million on that. The Essex Valley building in Nain, not just the water. In fact, this is a good point to say that the British government gave us a grant of $59 million to develop the Essex Valley water system in the eastern part of St. Elizabeth. The $100 million that NWC is going to spend is for equipment and buildings to make sure that the service is well established. In Spanish Town, the Spanish Town Road, 6 miles to Glenmore, road transmission main, $3.5 billion, Mr. President. We are building back stronger every day, even at the challenge NWC. And people will remember those blue pipes, the dark blue one and the light blue one by ferry, that took so long and we could, no, you don't remember? If you get the water, you say nothing. The only time you hear about water is when there is no water. So we have to keep working to make sure there's water. The Spanish Town Road transmission pipe for KSA, that's $1.5 billion. To Port Royal main transmission placement in Kingston, $300 million. Island-wide pump replacement, $300 million. Mr. President, on these spends, we are building back stronger, even while we go through this difficulty. Well, you'll hear about that 15 million new gallons coming into Kingston because, as you know, Minister, Cabinet approved that a couple of months ago. They're finishing the financial arrangements to bring that in, and so we're going to start that soon to make sure the 15 million gallons come into Kingston for more people to get water. So, Mr. President, we have to look at fixing NWC. Since NWC needs a lot of outside money to fix it, what will we do? Almost 3 years ago, Mr. President, the Commission contracted with Castalia, an international consulting firm, to make sure we look at a comprehensive transformation of the National Water Commission. Castalia looked at the needs of NWC to be capitalized, the prospect of bringing in new corporate and individual investors, and here were their three main initial conclusions. The National Water Commission needs a new business model. The current business model just does not work. If for 15 years all you do is make losses, that's not working. Tariffs to consumers are reaching an unaffordable level. In other words, people can't pay much more for the water that National Water Commission is doing. So we need much more efficiency and new equipment. That means we need more money. NWC's capital expenditure cannot be financed under the current business model. It's not tenable. And, of course, the government, Minister Clark, not putting more debt on his balance sheet. He wants Jamaica's debt to go in one direction, down, not up. After a very detailed and comprehensive explanation of the conclusion, Castalia arrived at 4 main recommendations. 1, the government needs to agree that NWC will be transformed into a limited liability company with shares. The government needs to agree that the water sector legislation and regulation should be modernized by passing a new Water Act which, among other things, removes statutory powers from NWC and transfers them to other appropriate bodies and provides for the cooperation of the service provision functions of the NWC. In other words, what that means, Mr. President, is that you can't have the National Water Commission providing water, competing for water, and also making the rules for everybody else who must be in the water sector. So that regulatory authority must be moved from them. The third one is that the government needs to direct officials to ensure affordability and access to water for poor families and communities consistent with the new water policy. And Senator Gale, I will, with your permission, have another sip of water. The government, the fourth recommendation by Castalia, will need to mandate the rapid implementation of these decisions by appointing an enterprise team to lead the transactions to transform the NWC. The DBJ will be the secretariat for the enterprise team. Well, Mr. President, the Prime Minister, the Most Honourable Andrew Holness, has agreed to the members of the prospective enterprise team, and the process of appointment is moving through the Minister of Finance and the Attorney General's chambers in the draft cabinet submission. Mr. President, the Andrew Holness administration will make necessary transformations, including difficult and complex ones such as this, in order to build back stronger. You're going to hear more. Wait. Hold your time. Mr. President, in order for NWC to take water to the last house on a hill, and there's only 5 families live up there, that's very, very expensive. Then you don't have to take the water up the hill, you have to pump it up the hill, you have to have lift station, very expensive. And so what we're looking at the ministry, Mr. President, is how we use renewable water and renewable energy to pump and get this water in. We need to make a new law that we should have. People should be building their houses with renewable water and with renewable energy, and the government doesn't need to pay for it. The financiers will be happy to pay for it. So we're looking at taking that forward. You will hear much more about that in due course. It's important to know that only about 15% of the water in this country is from renewable water. Now, where I come from in St. Elizabeth is 100%. When I grew up, on our land, we had a nice big tank, 40,000 gallons, which I now re-engineers into our new family home, and that's how we got our water. And we served a lot of people around it, so we need to make sure that we combine renewable water and renewable energy. And there's a good reason for that, Mr. President. You will find, we found out that really and truly, when NWC doesn't pay JPS for power and is delinquent for a period of time, JPS charges them 17% per year for that energy use. You can get an unincorporated individual can get a car loan for 6 to 7%. but a fully owned government entity is paying 17% to JPS First Energy. We cannot continue there. Therefore, we must look at getting renewable water and renewable energy twinned together to reduce that cost and make sure we improve our climate situation, Mr. President. As we look at building back stronger, the Prime Minister announced that he wanted 30,000 titles to be done in about 5 years in his next administration, which is now. Well, I looked at that, and 30,000 would take a long time given what we do today. The Titles Office send out a couple thousand a year, but we need to make sure that we get those titles done. So I wrapped up, I made sure I talked to the people at the NLA, and they have agreed that in the first year of a 3-year period, not 5, 10,000 titles will be presented. We're also looking at making sure we have electronic titling in Jamaica, using the torrent system that many other countries use. We're a little bit behind there, but we are going to make sure that we put in electronic titling in our system, Mr. President, because we have to make sure Jamaicans get their titles, convert these non-income producing assets that they have into income producing assets through lease, through mortgage, or through even sale. But Jamaicans must get their titles.
Senator Hill,
and
you need to wrap up.
I am wrapping up, Mr. President, and I saw you. Please. Come on. Yes. Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Leader. But actually, before you came in, Mr. President, I'm at the conclusion. So I'm going to say it now. Mr. President, the Andrew Holness administration, you can hear it again, has come through very credibly, the most stringent social, economic, health, entertainment, and every kind of test that the COVID pandemic has brought. Him stand up strong, and him good, him and him cabinet, and him people them around. We have educated our people to sanitize, practice physical but not necessarily social distancing, take their COVID tests if they feel unwell, self-quarantine when it's necessary, and we have even provided new facilities in record time to make more beds available to the people who caught the virus, thanks to Minister Tufton and his team. Given our fairly limited resources, Mr. President, and the near total unavailability of vaccines because richer nations sought to take care of their own and in the process resorted to hoarding vaccines, in spite of all these difficulties and challenges, the government led by the Honourable Prime Minister Andrew Holness has guided the country well through this valley of COVID-19 and its companion set of significant difficulties. And it's not over yet. As I did in the beginning, I asked Jamaicans again to take the vaccine when their turn comes around. Mr. President, the BPO sector has performed well. We have given them additional time to work from home, and the pivot is working well, and we expect more investment in that area. The Urban Development Corporation, under the chairmanship of Senator Brehm, has opened up Harmony Beach, a wonderful investment, opened by the Prime Minister.
On a point of order.
Yes, what's the point of order?
Yeah, the time allotted for the member has long exceeded the extension asked for. Are we giving more extension?
Yes.
So let us move for that so that he can get...
Senator Brown.
Yeah.
Over by 2 minutes, and I'm allowing him to wrap up.
Thank you, Mr. President. It is amazing. It is amazing that it is Senator Brown who is asking a speaker to wrap up. Jamaica's tourism minister is right now in Kenya. I just spoke to him before coming in here. He and I visited Spain and Saudi Arabia. And let me tell you something, and listen to this carefully. We take this for granted. Ed Bartlett is a star on the international tourism scene. When he comes back from Kenya, you're going to hear what he does.
Sorry, Mr. President, might I just, to follow on, as a cabinet minister, might the Senate be willing to just offer the courtesy to Senator Hill? I know you have made a general ruling, but just as is particular, we don't have a lot of them in here, so it's not something to be abused. I wonder if we could allow him the courtesy, Mr. President, of another 5 minutes.
Probably will be less.
Extending the time for the member to complete his presentation, but it can't be in the context of a cabinet minister. It has to be within the context of a senator speaking, and we're seeking extension.
Senator Morris, if you choose to move the request, then you can do so, and I'll put
so
it in the
I move that the member be given an additional 5 minutes to complete his presentation.
The members would have heard.
Senator Morris, thank you so much.
The members would have heard the gracious request from Senator Morris, and I put it to you. Those in favor? Right. Against?
We are in the process of fixing NWC to be fit for the purpose that Jamaicans need it to be. And you know, Mr. President, the COVID-19 pandemic has affected our country in almost every possible negative way. It is extremely challenging, stretching us to our limits. COVID-19 is a long-lasting and, quite frankly, Mr. President, just terrible for people in our country. But, Mr. President, we are Jamaicans. We never give up. We fight for successes even when only the will to win is left. But we are Jamaicans. Mr. President, no matter what COVID-19 pandemic might do, we are Jamaicans and we shall sing. We sing through all the circumstances for decades, Mr. President, until the whole world had no choice but to declare the song of our preeminent singer, Mr. Bob Marley, is the best song of the last century. None other could match One Love. I hear it in scores of countries around the world, Mr. President, and we as Jamaicans will continue to sing through this pandemic, and we will win. Mr. President, we toil and train and compete until we win, and we win in many of the Olympics since those early days in Helsinki, and we kept competing and shining until today. This wonderful story of ours, Jamaica, is the home of the fastest woman and the fastest man living on the planet. We are winners, Mr. President, and we don't give up. Luckily for Jamaica at this time, Mr. President, we have a Prime Minister in Andrew Holness who is a clear winner. No question whatsoever about that. Prime Minister Holness and his cabinet of ministers have given the country wise, balanced, unconfrontational, and forward-looking leadership based on good knowledge and data. And so, Mr. President, in the face of this terrible pandemic, Jamaica is building back stronger, and we will overcome this pandemic too, and we will win, Mr. President. Thank you.
I thank both Senator Morris and Senator Hill for your presentations to the State of the Nation. I thank Senior Senator Morris for his gracious request that Senator Hill be given time to complete his presentation, because it was not my inclination to do so. Minister?
Well, Mr. President, I knew it was not your inclination. You had been quite clear in the guidelines that you had given, and that's why I had asked for the special carvel, but understood. And we appreciate the request which was made. Mr. President, it is not intended to do any further business today. Might the Senate be adjourned for a date to be fixed? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, the question is that the debate on the state and nation be suspended. Those in favor? Against? It is so ordered. And as far as the sitting is concerned, the question is the Senate be adjourned for a date to be fixed. Those in favor? Against?
Watch yourself online, that's what my crew say. Make it a new day. A reminder by the Broadcasting Commission. We the BCJ. What if it was your friend in the mix? What if